Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever questioned the very foundations of what you consider good or evil?
Mm.
Or maybe wondered if the truths you hold dear are actually just, well, old superstitions?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that bubbles up now and then.
Today, we're taking a deep dive into a work that challenges everything, really everything, forcing us to ask, what if everything we believe about morality, knowledge, and even ourselves is merely a well-worn mask?
A profound question.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we try to transform complex concepts into accessible insights, tailored just for you,
We're here to be your guides through some pretty dense but fascinating material.
helping you find those aha moments without the information overload, hopefully.
That's the plan.
Today, we're plunging into a truly monumental work, Friedrich Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil, published way back in 1886.
Cornerstone, really.
But we're not just looking at the philosophical arguments in isolation, we're also digging into the invaluable insights from Walter Kaufmann's translator's preface.
Yeah, and that preface isn't just, academic throat clearing. It's actually crucial.
Exactly. It gives us a roadmap into Nietzsche's intentions, the very unique structure of his radical thought, and how we as readers are kind of meant to engage with it.
Our mission in this deep dive is to explore Nietzsche's audacious reevaluation of Western philosophy and morality. It's a big task.
Huge.
We'll meticulously uncover his profound critiques of traditional ideas of truth, knowledge, the ego, free will, all the big ones,
Mm-hmm.
and then examine his provocative vision for a philosopher of the future and the noble soul.
Which leads to a really important question, I think. What does it truly mean for you, listening now, to confront ideas that might be fundamentally at odds with the deeply ingrained truths that govern your own life, your society?
And maybe even your most fundamental sense of self. It can be quite unsettling.
Definitely. Okay, section 1, unpacking Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil, a blueprint for a new philosophy. Before we even get to the core arguments, Kaufmann's preface tells us something absolutely vital about how to approach beyond good and evil.
Yes, this is key.
This isn't a casual read of standalone quotes, the kind you might scroll through online.
Right. Not a Twitter feed of aphorisms.
Exactly. We might be tempted to skim, to pull out a pithy aphorism here or there, but that would, according to Kaufmann, be a profound misunderstanding of Nietzsche's entire intent and the very nature of the book.
Absolutely. Kaufman explains that this book, published in 1886, came right after Thus Spoke Zarathustra.
Which was a very different beast.
Very different. Zarathustra was highly literary, symbolic, almost poetic, full of what Nietzsche himself called indirect communication, which, frankly, many found challenging to grasp philosophically.
Understandably.
So Nietzsche wrote Beyond Good and Evil specifically for those readers, aiming for a philosophy presented differently, very differently, one that, while still incredibly profound, offered a more direct, if still layered, philosophical argument.
So understanding that context from the start is really important for us as readers and for you listening.
Crucial.
So this isn't a book where you can just flip to any random section and expect to get the full picture or even a complete idea.
Not at all. Kaufman explicitly states that Beyond Good and Evil should not be treated as a mere collection of aphorisms for browsing.
Right.
Instead, he insists that each of its 9 major parts, maybe with the exception of part 4, he hedges a bit, there's meant to be read straight through.
Like a continuous argument?
Exactly. It's designed as a continuous evolving argument, almost like a symphonic piece where themes are introduced, developed, and then surprisingly, often radically qualified later on.
That's a vital distinction. So what's said in one section might be twisted or deepened later?
Precisely. It's frequently qualified decisively in the next section, or even just a few pages later. The often surprising developments of an idea are, as Kaufman notes, one of the major charms and challenges of this work.
Which makes the book, as he puts it so well, a book to reread and live with.
Yes, it really demands a higher level of intellectual engagement, doesn't it? A willingness to follow a winding, often unsettling path, and to let the arguments unfold in their own time.
That unique structure itself implies a specific kind of intellectual discipline from the reader. It's definitely not about quick consumption.
No, it's about immersion and re-engagement.
Yeah.
When we think about how we often consume complex information today, summaries, sound bites,
Yeah, the quick hit.
Nietzsche's form is a direct challenge to that. It asks us to slow down, to grapple, and to return to the text repeatedly, recognizing that initial impressions might be fundamentally subverted by later arguments.
It's almost like the structure is part of the philosophy.
It is. It's a testament to the idea that true understanding often requires multiple passes and a long-term, almost iterative commitment. It actively forces you to question your initial interpretations, preventing superficial readings.
He suggests that profound truths aren't easily encapsulated in a single statement.
Exactly. They emerge from the interplay and evolution of ideas, requiring a dialectical engagement with the text over time. This form, in itself, is a kind of sorting mechanism for readers, or as Nietzsche might say, a criterion for the order of rank.
Ooh, criterion for the order of rank, that sounds.
Well, typically Nietzschean, doesn't it? Bold, maybe a bit
So
least.
definitely bold. It tests the reader, demanding a certain kind of intellectual rigor. So he's not just making philosophical arguments, he's shaping the very type of person who can engage with them.
Okay, so with that demanding approach in mind, how does he then challenge the very concept of truth itself, something most other philosophers take as their starting point?
Well, this is where it gets fascinating. Nietzsche doesn't just present new ideas. He meticulously dismantles the very process of how we've arrived at our philosophical truths. He sees much of it as a kind of noble childishness.
Noble childishness, wow. Yeah. He questions the very will to truth itself, the driving force behind Western philosophy. He asks, quite provocatively, suppose we want truth. Why not rather untruth and uncertainty, even ignorance?
That's a fundamental challenge, isn't it? Questioning the goal itself.
It completely undermines the core drive of centuries of philosophical inquiry. He's suggesting that our unwavering pursuit of truth might actually be a limited, perhaps even detrimental instinct.
So he's saying that these grand philosophical systems we've built, designed to find ultimate truths, might actually be built on, well, pretty shaky ground.
Extremely shaky, in his view. He suggests that philosophical dogmatizing may have been no more than a noble childishness and tyrannism, essentially an amateurish stage of thought.
And what are these flimsy foundations he talks about?
Well, he points to things like popular superstition, specifically the soul superstition, which, he argues in the form of the subject and ego superstition, has not even yet ceased to do mischief.
So our belief in a stable, singular I or soul is a foundational error.
A huge one for him. He also cites some play on words, a seduction by grammar, implying our very language habits can trap us into false assumptions, or even audacious generalization of very narrow, very personal, very human, all too human facts.
So we mistake our limited human experience for universal truth.
Precisely. And he identifies the fundamental faith of the metaphysicians as belief in opposite values, like true, false, good, evil, spiritual, material.
Things we just assume are fundamental opposites.
Yes. Nietzsche provocatively suggests doubting whether there are any opposites at all. He asks if these popular valuations are merely foreground estimates, only provisional perspectives, perhaps even from some nook, perhaps from below, frog perspective.
Frog perspective, that's such a vivid image. Limited bias.
Exactly. A low-to-the-ground viewpoint, unable to see the whole landscape. He then pushes further, asking if perhaps deception, selfishness, and lust might actually possess a higher and more fundamental value for life than things like truth or goodness.
Whoa, okay, that's a radical reevaluation. It forces you to question everything you thought you knew about value itself.
Everything. And he doesn't hold back on the shelf life of these so-called truths either. He has this incredible line.
Oh, the one about the hams.
Yes. A normally constituted truth lives, let us say, as a rule, 17 or 18 years. At most 20, rarely more. But such aged truths are always exceedingly thin.
Thin, yeah.
Nevertheless, it is only at that stage that the majority makes their acquaintance. All these majority truths are rather like rancid, spoiled hams.
Rancid hams. It's just so visceral. You can almost smell the decay of those old truths.
It's an unforgettable metaphor.
And think about that for a moment, listener. How many truths do we cling to today that might just be rancid hams from a bygone era, adopted by a compact majority long after their actual shelf life?
It makes you wonder what foundational beliefs we're holding on to that are essentially philosophical leftovers, maybe long past their expiration date.
And he sees that compact majority as actively dangerous, right?
Absolutely. The most dangerous enemy of truth and freedom. For Nietzsche, these majority truths aren't merely outdated. They become obstacles to genuine life and thought, leading to what he calls moral scurvy.
Moral scurvy. Wow, so it's not just intellectual error, it's like a societal disease.
Disease that stunts genuine philosophical inquiry and personal growth, in his view.
Okay, so if these are the shaky foundations and these aging, rancid truths are adopted by the masses, what about the people building these edifices, the philosophers themselves? Nietzsche has some particularly sharp insights into their hidden motives, doesn't he?
Oh, yes, this is where it gets really interesting.
Because he suggests that what should make us suspicious of philosophers isn't primarily their mistakes in logic or argument,
Right, not just flawed reasoning.
but their often profound lack of honesty about their true underlying motivations.
Exactly. He argues that philosophers often pose as if their opinions are derived from cold, pure, divinely unconcerned dialectic.
They put on this air of objectivity.
Precisely. An air of rigorous, almost superhuman reasoning, as if they've transcended all personal bias. But Nietzsche says, at bottom, it's often an assumption, a hunch, indeed a kind of inspiration, most often a desire of the heart that has been filtered and made abstract, that they defend with reasons they have sought after the fact.
So they find the reasons to justify what they already believe deep down.
That's the idea. They are, in his words, advocates who resent that name. They are, in essence, arguing for their deeply personal convictions while pretending, consciously or unconsciously, to be detached discoverers of truth.
So every great philosophy for Nietzsche isn't some pure product of reason. It's more like,
A personal confession of its author and a kind of involuntary and unconscious memoir,
wow, a memoir disguised as metaphysics.
where moral or immoral intentions form the real germ of life within that philosophy. He completely rejects the idea that a purely objective drive to knowledge is the primary father of philosophy.
So what drives it then?
He argues instead that another drive, perhaps the will to power or some other deep-seated impulse, employs understanding as a mere instrument to achieve its own deeper ends.
That radically reframes philosophy, doesn't it? From a detached pursuit of pure reason to something much more human, driven by desires and values.
Deeply human. He suggests any basic human drive wants to be master and attempts to philosophize in that spirit, aiming to represent itself as the ultimate purpose of existence.
And he draws a sharp distinction here between these true philosophers and, say, scholars or scientists.
Yes, a crucial distinction. Scholars, or scientific men, he concedes, might indeed have something like a genuine drive for knowledge, what he calls a small, independent clockwork that functions vigorously within them.
But their personal lives are separate.
Often, yes. Their real interests, he suggests, often lie elsewhere in family, money, politics, their careers. He finds it almost indifferent whether a scholar becomes a philologist or a fungi expert. It's a job, in a sense.
But for the philosopher,
Conversely, for the philosopher, there is nothing whatever that is impersonal. Their entire worldview, their morality, bears decided and decisive witness to who he is. Meaning, it reveals in what order of rank the innermost drives of his nature truly stand. The philosophy is the person in a deep way.
that's a powerful idea. The scholar's work can be detached, but the philosopher's entire being is on display.
Exactly. And to illustrate this, Nietzsche takes a few pointed jabs, as he often does. He criticizes Kant's stiff and decorous tartuffery.
Tartuffery, like pious hypocrisy.
Yeah, a kind of affected virtue.
Okay.
And he mocks Spinoza's hocus-pocus of mathematical form.
Why? Because it seems objective.
Yes. He presents these as examples of philosophers masking their personal desires or timidity behind grand, impersonal, seemingly objective systems. Spinoza's mathematical style, for instance, is seen not as pure rationality, but as a masquerade of a sick hermit, betraying what Nietzsche saw as personal timidity and vulnerability.
So this raises an important question for you, our listener. If every philosophy, even the grandest, is ultimately a disguised personal confession, what does that tell you about the foundational ideas you might be accepting?
Right, perhaps without probing the deeply human, maybe even flawed source of those ideas.
It challenges us to look beyond the logic to the person behind it.
And this hidden, deep-seated personal motivation leads us directly to what Nietzsche considers the most fundamental drive of all, the ultimate desire of the heart, the will to power.
Okay, section 2, the radical revaluation of core concepts.
Let's get into it.
So if our truths are shaky and our philosophers are just advocates for their desires, what about our most basic, undeniable sense of self? That feeling that I think and I will, surely those are solid ground.
Well, not for Nietzsche. He challenges even these, digging into the very fabric of our subjective experience with just radical skepticism.
How does he tackle I think? That seems pretty self-evident. Cogito ergo sum, right?
Not so fast, according to Nietzsche. He calls the assertion, I think, a series of daring assertions that are incredibly difficult, maybe impossible to actually prove.
Daring assertions. How so?
He meticulously breaks it down, showing us what we implicitly assume. First, that I think, rather than just there is thinking. Second, that something must think for a thought to occur. Third, that thinking is an activity of an ego acting as a cause.
Okay, those do sound like assumptions when you put it that way.
And finally, that we even know what thinking is, that we have some immediate grasp of its essence. For Nietzsche, these aren't self-evident truths, but profound, unexamined metaphysical assumptions baked into our language and thought.
So it's almost like the grammar is tricking us. The subject-verb structure implies an actor doing the thinking.
Precisely. He argues that a thought comes when it wishes, and not when I wish.
That's interesting. Thoughts just appear.
Yes. So it's a falsification of the facts, he says, to claim the subject I is the condition for the verb think. Even the seemingly neutral phrase, it thinks, is still an interpretation, a leftover from grammatical habits that assume an agent for every activity.
Like assuming there's a lightninger that lightnings.
Exactly. Just like older atomism sought a lump of matter for every operating power, Nietzsche suggests we should learn to get along without this little it, this remnant of the honest little old ego.
It's a profound dismantling of our intuitive sense of self as a unified, independent thing doing the thinking.
And this deconstruction of the I extends directly to the concept of freedom of the will.
Which most people feel they experience directly.
Right. But Nietzsche presents it not as a genuine reality, but as a comforting illusion. He describes it as a complex state of delight.
A state of delight. How?
It's kind of internal psychological drama, where the person willing both commands and simultaneously identifies with the one who obeys within themselves. There's a duality. This allows them to enjoy the triumph over obstacles and the increase of the sensation of power that comes with success, believing that their singular independent will alone achieved it.
So we identify with the part that succeeds and feel powerful because of it.
Yes, the synthetic concept I, this constructed unified self, deceives us about the inherent duality of commanding and obeying within our own minds. We smooth over the internal complexity.
He puts it so incisively. He who wills believes with a fair amount of certainty that will and action are somehow one. He ascribes the success to the will itself, and thereby enjoys an increase of the sensation of power which accompanies all success.
It's a masterful observation, isn't it? How we construct our own sense of agency and pride, effectively taking credit for processes that are far more complex and perhaps less ours than we'd like to believe.
How often do you feel like you've made a conscious, deliberate choice, only to realize, maybe later upon reflection, that perhaps a deeper, less conscious it was at play?
All the time, if you're honest.
It's a profound challenge to our intuitive sense of autonomy. It suggests our experience of free will is actually a complex, maybe self-serving interpretation of something more fundamental, less personal.
Makes you wonder how much of our sense of control is, well, a delightful illusion, as he says.
Which leads us directly to Nietzsche's most famous, most provocative idea, the will to power.
Yes, and importantly, not just as a mere psychological urge, but as the very essence of life, a truly totalizing metaphysical concept.
So connecting this to the bigger picture, he thinks the instinct of self-preservation, which we often see as primary, especially after Darwin,
Right, survival of the fittest.
is actually just a result, a secondary outcome.
Precisely. The true fundamental driving force for all living things, and maybe even beyond, is the will to power.
So he's basically flipping Darwin on his head. Instead of just trying to survive, organisms are primarily driven to expand, to exert their strength, to overcome.
That's the core of it. He argues that physiologists, and really all scientists, should reconsider self-preservation as the cardinal instinct. Instead, he proposes a living thing seeks above all to discharge its strength. Life itself is will to power. Self-preservation is only one of the indirect and most frequent results.
Discharge its strength like an overflowing energy.
Yes, an outward push, an expansion, a mastering. He goes even further, proposing that all organic functions, maybe even mechanical occurrences where force is active, could be traced back to this single fundamental will to power.
Wow, that's huge. He concludes with this sweeping statement, the world viewed from inside, it would be will to power and nothing else.
It's incredibly ambitious. To really grasp will to power as a totalizing metaphysical concept,
Mm.
you have to think beyond just human motivation.
How so? Give me an example.
Well, instead of a rock simply existing passively, maybe even its structural integrity, its resistance to erosion, could be seen as a kind of low-level will to power, a drive to maintain and exert its form.
Or an ecosystem.
Right. It's not just about species preserving themselves. Yeah. It's about the dynamic interplay of forces, the expansion of life, the constant overcoming and shaping of environments. This isn't just a tweak to psychology. It's a fundamentally different lens for viewing everything.
That sounds like it would require a complete overhaul of how we understand not just human behavior, but maybe physics, biology, everything.
It would. And if this is the fundamental drive, what does it mean for our understanding of human nature, especially those parts we often try to suppress?
The darker parts.
Yes, it absolutely requires a radical shift in psychology. Nietzsche states, quite scathingly, all psychology so far has got stuck in moral prejudices and fears. It has not dared to descend into the depths.
So he thought psychology was too timid, too bound by morality.
Exactly. He calls for psychology to become a morphology and the doctrine of the development of the will to power.
Okay, what does that mean?
It means understanding even the effects of hatred, envy, covetousness, and the lust to rule as conditions of life, as factors which, fundamentally and essentially, must be present in the general economy of life.
Whoa, wait. Hatred, envy, lust for power? These are necessary conditions of life.
And must therefore, he continues, be further enhanced if life is to be further enhanced.
Enhanced. So what we traditionally consider vices or negative emotions might actually be essential, even something to be strengthened for life to flourish. Is he saying we should just embrace our inner monster?
Well, that's the vital question, isn't it? Nietzsche isn't necessarily advocating for reckless indulgence in these effects in every single person. It's more complex.
Okay.
Rather, he's suggesting that these drives, which we label wicked due to our moral prejudices, are fundamental expressions of the will to power. From a psychological and biological perspective, he argues they are crucial for life's dynamism, its growth, its overcoming.
So suppressing them entirely, viewing them as purely negative.
Is to weaken life itself from this perspective. He acknowledges how difficult this hypothesis is. He notes it would cause distress and aversion in a still hale and hearty conscience, and that one might suffer from such a view of things as from seasickness.
Seasickness. Yeah, that captures the feeling. It's deeply unsettling because it challenges our most ingrained moral categories.
And forces us to reconsider the very nature of human impulses and the societal structures that judge them.
This is a truly unsettling idea. What if our wicked drives are not just natural, but in some fundamental way necessary for life's enhancement? It flips our traditional moral compass upside down.
Completely. And this radical reevaluation extends inevitably to the very nature of truth itself. If instincts and desires, especially the will to power, are so fundamental, what becomes of our cherished objective truth?
Right. We usually link truth with goodness, don't we? Something inherently beneficial, something that helps us.
We do. But Nietzsche warns us that this too is a prejudice, that truth can be profoundly dangerous.
Dangerous.
He argues flat out. Something might be true while being harmful and dangerous in the highest degree. He even suggests that those who would know it completely would perish under its weight.
Crushed by reality.
Something like that. The strength of a spirit, for Nietzsche, is measured not by how much truth it can find, but by how much of the truth one could still barely endure.
How much you can handle.
Or, alternatively, to what degree one would require it to be thinned down, shrouded, sweetened, blunted, falsified.
Falsified. So some degree of illusion or appearance isn't just inevitable, but actually necessary for life to thrive, for us to function without being overwhelmed.
That's exactly his point. It's necessary for vitality. Paradoxically, he notes that the evil and unhappy are more favored when it comes to the discovery of certain parts of truth, perhaps because they have fewer comforting illusions to cling to.
That's a fascinating turn. So our ability to exist, to grow, might depend on a certain filtering, a necessary falsification, or even deliberately avoiding certain aspects of reality.
Yes. That challenges the very foundation of scientific and philosophical inquiry, doesn't it? The relentless pursuit of unvarnished truth.
It really does.
He sees the spirit's inherent will to mere appearance, to simplification, to masks, to cloaks, in short, to the surface, as a fundamental life-affirming drive.
So we naturally simplify and categorize.
Yes. The spirit appropriates the foreign by assimilating the new to the old, Simplifying the complex and overlooking or repulsing whatever is totally contradictory. It's a process of retouching and, yes, falsifying the whole picture to suit itself.
Why?
All in service, he says, of the feeling of increased power. It's a creative act, an artistry of perception almost.
And this process includes deliberately choosing not to know, even about ourselves.
Precisely. It's not just external reality, but our internal world too. This drive also includes a suddenly erupting decision in favor of ignorance, of deliberate exclusion, a shutting of one's windows to certain truth,
Like closing the curtains.
and even the will of the spirit to let itself be deceived. It's a testament to the spirit's active role in shaping its own reality for its own benefit.
So the opposite, forcing yourself to see uncomfortable truths.
That, for Nietzsche, is the seeker after knowledge who forces his spirit to recognize things against its natural inclination to simplify and cloak. He calls this a cruelty of the intellectual conscience.
A cruelty, wow, like doing violence to your own mind's protective mechanism.
Exactly. It's an act of intellectual violence against the spirit's natural will to appearance.
Nietzsche famously states, every word also a mask, and every philosophy also conceals a philosophy. Every opinion is also a hideout.
Powerful lines. A reminder that we're always operating through layers of interpretation, through veils and appearances. Even when we think we're grasping pure truth, we are, in a sense, artists of our own reality.
So this raises an important question. If our minds instinctively simplify, categorize, and even lie to themselves in order to grow and function, how much of what we call truth is actually a necessary falsification?
Right. And what would it feel like to embrace the idea that there's artistry in our very perception, and that some illusions are actually essential for vitality?
These radical ideas about truth, will, the self, they naturally lead Nietzsche to a scathing critique of modern European morality and society.
Yes, which he sees as stifling these fundamental drives and pushing humanity toward a dangerous mediocrity.
Okay, Section 3. Nietzsche's critique of modern European morality and society.
Buckle up.
He pulls no punches when he looks at modern society, does he? He sees this distinct herd animal mentality taking over, and he finds it deeply problematic, almost terrifying.
He does. He states bluntly that the compact majority is the most dangerous enemy of truth and freedom. And this isn't just, a political statement.
No, it feels much deeper than that.
It is. He argues that modern European morality is fundamentally herd animal morality, primarily focused on the preservation of the community above all else.
Survival of the group.
Yes. And from this perspective, immorality is simply anything that seems dangerous to communal survival, anything that stands out, asserts individual difference, or challenges the group norm.
So conformity is the highest virtue.
In essence, this prioritization of the group, of conformity, he believes, inevitably leads to the leveling and mediocritization of man,
Leveling and mediocritization.
producing what he calls a useful, industrious, handy, multi-purpose herd animal. A human being stripped of unique, challenging, potentially dangerous qualities, reduced to just a functional component of the collective.
So values that we might consider positive today, like universal equality, widespread compassion, seeking comfort, are, for Nietzsche, actually symptoms of this decline, this movement towards the herd.
Precisely. He critiques equality of rights and sympathy for all that suffers as clear symptoms of this pervasive herd instinct. He argues they foster unmanly tenderness and a deadly hatred of suffering generally, leading to an inability to remain spectators to let something suffer.
An inability to watch suffering. Why is that bad, in his view?
For Nietzsche, it represents a morality of timidity, a fundamental fear of pain and struggle, both one's own and others. This timidity, he suggests, even extends to siding with criminals, viewing punishment itself as unfair because it inflicts suffering. It reveals for him a fundamental weakness, an inability to affirm life in its totality, including its harsh aspects.
And he connects this herd mentality very directly to the political movements of his time, right? Anarchists, socialists.
Yes, he sees a direct line. He links this herd animal morality to the ever-matter howling of the anarchist dogs and socialists who embrace slogans like ni Dieu ni maître, neither God nor master.
He sees them as united.
United in their thorough and instinctive hostility to any form of society beyond the autonomous herd. They resist, he says, every special claim, every special right and privilege.
Because that implies inequality.
Exactly. He provocatively states that with such movements, once all are equal, nobody needs rights anymore, because rights, for him, only exist meaningfully within a hierarchical structure.
And he warns this trajectory could lead Europe towards what?
Towards a new Buddhism, by which he seems to mean a kind of spiritual paralysis, a pervasive nihilism born of a generalized pity and a will to nothingness, a quiet fading away. He even cites the religion of pity, an excess of a pity with God, as a characteristic feature of this democratic age.
Think about modern discourse. How often do we see a strong, almost absolute emphasis on universal empathy, social comfort, and equality?
Constantly.
Nietzsche would ask if this is truly an advancement or a symptom of a deeper, perhaps unconscious societal weakening, a fear of the difficult, the challenging, the unequal that might actually be necessary, in his view, for human greatness. It's a truly uncomfortable thought experiment.
Deeply uncomfortable. And this critique of democratic leveling is, for Nietzsche, inextricably linked with his thoughts on Christianity.
Ah, yes, Christianity. He sees it as a primary historical force in this inversion of values, doesn't he?
He does. Connecting this to the bigger picture, Nietzsche sees Christianity as having profoundly shaped Europe, but not necessarily for the better, particularly regarding its effect on the type of man it cultivated.
He describes Christianity as Platonism for the people. Can you unpack that a bit more for us? What does he mean by that?
Certainly. So Platonism, at its core, suggested there was a perfect, unchanging realm of forms or ideas beyond our imperfect sensory world, a realm of true reality, eternal ideals. Think Plato's cave, the world of shadows versus the world of forms.
Okay.
Nietzsche's arguing that Christianity took this philosophical concept, simplified it dramatically, and made it accessible, even mandatory, for the common person. Especially through the idea of a heavenly realm, a spiritual ideal, separate from and superior to this earthly world.
So it made Platonism digestible for the masses.
Exactly. But this simplification, he believes, came at a profound cost. The cost of embracing earthly life and its inherent struggles. It shifted focus away from this world towards a promised afterlife. In his view, it represents a sacrifice of all freedom, all pride, all self-confidence of the spirit.
He calls it enslavement and self-mockery, self-mutilation of the human spirit. Strong words.
Very strong. And he finds the central symbol of Christianity, the paradoxical formula God on the cross, to be the ultimate expression of this inversion of values he despises.
Why God on the cross specifically?
He sees it as nothing less than a revaluation of all the values of antiquity, where the Orient, deep Orient, the Oriental slave, as he puts it, took revenge on Rome's noble and frivolous tolerance.
Revenge. How?
For Nietzsche, this marked a profound historical shift, where the values of the weak, the suffering, the downtrodden, previously seen as inferior in the ancient world, were elevated to the highest moral status. This subverted the older aristocratic values of strength, health, and vitality. The crucified God symbolized the triumph of suffering and weakness over power and nobility.
And what was the church's mission and its ultimate effect on humanity in his eyes? Because he doesn't see it as preserving the best, does he?
Quite the opposite. The church's mission from Nietzsche's stark perspective was to preserve all that was sick and that suffered, which he interprets, devastatingly, as in fact and in truth, to worsen the European race.
Worsen the race, that's quite a claim.
It is. He argues the church aimed to stand all valuations on their head, to break the strong, cast suspicion on joy in this life, bend everything haughty, manly, conquering, domineering into unsureness, agony of conscience, self-destruction.
Turning strength into a source of guilt.
Precisely. It inverted all love of the earthly and of dominion over the earth into hatred of the earth and the earthly. This created, in his view, a smaller, almost ridiculous type, a herd animal, something eager to please, sickly and mediocre has been bred, the European of today. He believes this fundamental inversion has deeply weakened European potential.
He even has that provocative statement about love, saying, Christianity gave Eros poison to drink. He did not die of it, but degenerated into a vice.
Yes, suggesting it twisted natural love and passion into something guilt-ridden and degraded. And he references Pascal's sacrifice of the intellect as a suicide of reason, implying that extreme faith requires abandoning critical thought.
This is a truly challenging viewpoint. It suggests that values we might instinctively see as virtues like pity, humility, prioritizing the afterlife, could actually be profoundly detrimental from a different life-affirming perspective. How does this reframe our understanding of historical moral development?
It forces us to question the narrative of linear moral progress, suggesting that a dominant force like Christianity might, from Nietzsche's perspective, have led to a profound weakening of certain human potentials, even while fostering others. It's a deeply unsettling rereading of history.
And Nietzsche doesn't stop at these general societal and religious critiques. He also casts a particularly critical, often cutting eye on specific national characteristics, doesn't he? Including his own people.
Yes, he does. He was a keen, if often harsh, observer of national character. He believed the unique spirit and history of a people profoundly impacted their philosophy and future. It's a fascinating, if sometimes uncomfortable, dissection.
Okay, let's go through some of them. What about the Germans, his own people? He wasn't exactly complimentary, was he?
No, not entirely. Nietzsche describes the German soul as manifold, of diverse origins, more put together and superimposed than actually built. He sees them as a people of the most monstrous mixture and medley of races.
A messy mix.
Yeah. And he notes that German profundity, often lauded, is frequently merely a hard and sluggish digestion, a slow, convoluted process, rather than genuine, swift insight. He observes their love for clouds and everything that is unclear, becoming twilight, damp, and overcast, suggesting they often mistake obscurity for depth.
He even calls them the Täuschvolk, the deceiver people. Why?
It highlights what he perceived as a deep-seated ambiguity, perhaps even a lack of clarity about their own nature. He writes, "What boorish indifference to taste, how the noblest stands right next to the meanest, how disorderly and rich this whole psychic household is."
Disorderly and rich. That's quite a combination.
It captures his perception of a German cultural disunity, a kind of raw, unrefined power. He felt this impacted their philosophical output, leading to what he calls their lack of sound in the ears, suggesting Germans read with the eye, not aloud, missing the music of language.
Except for Luther's Bible.
Right. For him, the true masterpiece of German prose, the one that genuinely grew into German hearts, was Luther's Bible. Precisely because it possessed this musicality he found lacking elsewhere. And he worries about Germans trading their reputation for profundity too cheaply for Prussian pluck and a Berlin wit and sand.
Swapping depth for superficial cleverness. Quite an indictment from a fellow German. Now, moving across the channel, what about the English?
The English. Nietzsche calls them an unphilosophical race, suggesting they lack a true innate philosophical instinct. He sees figures like Bacon, Hobbes, Hume, and Locke not as the pinnacle of philosophy, but as representing an attack on the philosophical spirit or a debasement and lowering of the value of the concept of philosophy.
So he thought English empiricism and pragmatism were somehow anti-philosophical.
In a sense, yes. Too focused on the practical, the observable, lacking metaphysical depth, perhaps. He also argues they need Christianity for discipline to become moralized and somewhat humanized, viewing them as inherently gloomier, more sensual, stronger in will, and more brutal than the Germans, and therefore needing religion as a kind of corrective.
He's particularly blunt about English Christianity itself.
Very blunt. He says it has an odor of spleen and alcoholic dissipation, for which it serves as a remedy, a subtler poison against the coarser. And he remarks on the rise of mediocre minds, like Darwin, John Stuart Mill, and Herbert Spencer beginning to predominate in the middle regions of European taste.
And he blames England for, what was it?
European vulgarity, the plebeianism of modern ideas, that of England. For Nietzsche, England was the breeding ground for the leveling, anti-aristocratic, utilitarian ideas he so despised.
Okay, what about the French? He seemed to have a more positive view there, at least initially.
Yes, initially. He credits them with the genesis of European noblesse of feeling, of taste, of manners, is the work and invention of France. They were, for him, the architects of true European aristocratic culture and refinement.
But there's always a but with Nietzsche.
There often is. He laments that over this damnable Anglomania of modern ideas, the French soul has in the end become so thin and emaciated. He saw the influence of English democratic and utilitarian ideas as weakening the once noble and refined French spirit.
Okay, now his observations on the Jews. These are particularly nuanced and require careful framing, especially given the context of his time. Kaufman, the translator, emphasizes this.
Yes, this is absolutely crucial for understanding his perspective, and it demonstrates how his thought often went against the grain of the rampant anti-Semitism of his contemporaries. Nietzsche describes the Jews as the strongest, toughest, and purest race now living in Europe.
Strongest, toughest, purest. He admired their resilience.
Immensely. He admires their ability to prevail even under the worst conditions, even better than under favorable conditions, by means of virtues that today one would need not be ashamed before modern ideas. He notes their remarkable consistency and slow rate of change, as slowly as possible, much like the Russian Empire, he also observed.
And he saw them as a key factor in Europe's future.
Yes. A thinker concerned with Europe's future, he asserts, must consider Jews and Russians as the provisionally surest and most probable factors in the great play and fight of forces. He even provocatively states that the Jews, if they wanted it, could even now have preponderance, indeed quite literally mastery over Europe.
Which sounds like a common anti-Semitic trope.
But, and this is the crucial part Kaufman highlights, Nietzsche immediately adds, that they are not working and planning for that is equally certain. He inverts the cliché. He acknowledges what he perceived as their inherent strength and potential power, but explicitly denies the conspiracy theories about their desire for domination. It's a complex statement showing admiration for their perceived strength and resilience, not malice.
That's a really important clarification. And finally, the Russians.
Along with the Jews, they are seen as provisionally surest and most probable factors for Europe's future. He states that the strength to will has long been accumulated and stored up in Russia, menacingly waiting to be discharged. A vast potential energy.
Menacingly. Does he see them as a threat?
Perhaps more as a necessary counterbalance or even a catalyst. He suggests that internal upheavals and the shattering of the empire into small units, including parliamentary nonsense and newspaper reading, things he generally disdained, might paradoxically be needed to rid Europe of its greatest danger.
Which is?
Europe's own profound will paralysis, its decadence. For Nietzsche, Russia represented a vast, untamed reservoir of will and potential, a stark contrast to what he saw as Europe's moral and spiritual decay.
So Nietzsche's often provocative, sometimes sweeping generalizations about different peoples really highlight his belief that culture, physiology, history, they're all deeply intertwined, shaping a people's spirit.
Exactly. His observations, however controversial they seem now, force us to consider how collective character might influence societal development and philosophical thought. It's a snapshot of a challenging historical perspective on national identity.
Okay. This brings us to a part of the text that can be particularly challenging, perhaps the most controversial, but is absolutely crucial to understanding Nietzsche's overall critique of modern ideas. His thoughts on women.
Yes, this section requires careful handling.
Now, we come to a section that often elicits strong reactions, and for very understandable reasons. Nietzsche's views on women are, without a doubt, one of the most debated and often criticized aspects of his philosophy.
Absolutely.
It's vital for us to present his unvarnished perspective directly from the text as a document of his thought and perhaps the prevailing sentiments of his era without any endorsement from our side. We're reporting, not agreeing.
Precisely. Nietzsche views woman's desire for self-reliance, for education, for enlightening man about woman as such as one of the worst developments of the general uglification of Europe.
The uglification of Europe? Wow.
Yes. He claims much pedantry, superficiality, school mistressness, petty presumption, petty licentiousness, and immodesty lies concealed in woman, which he says has been kept in check primarily by fear of man. He warns quite sharply, woe when the eternally boring in woman, she's rich in that, is permitted to venture forth.
That's incredibly harsh, and he suggests a radical, fundamental difference in their relationship to truth itself.
He does. He states quite starkly, what is truth to woman? From the beginning, nothing has been more alien, repugnant, and hostile to woman than truth. Her great art is the lie. Her highest concern is mere appearance and beauty.
Her great art is the lie.
And then he provocatively asks men to confess that we honor and love precisely this art and this instinct in woman, especially those profound men who have a hard time and for our relief like to associate with beings under whose hands, eyes, and tender follies our seriousness, our gravity, and profundity almost appear to us like folly.
So he's suggesting that profound men need this feminine artifice as a kind of relief from their own seriousness.
That seems to be the implication, a counterpoint to their intellectual struggles. He sees what he calls defeminization and retrogression, occurring as women gain rights and aspire to economic and legal self-reliance.
Retrogression. How so?
For him, this meant women were merely imitating manliness or becoming free thinkers and scribblers, losing what he considered their essential feminine qualities. He suggests, for instance, that a woman without piety would not seem utterly obnoxious and ridiculous to a profound and godless man, implying that a certain religious devoutness or piety was a natural and appealing feminine characteristic.
And he specifically calls out certain emancipated women of his time.
Yes, he cites Madame Roland, Madame de Stael, and George Sand as the three comical women as such, and precisely the best involuntary counterarguments against emancipation and feminine vainglory, seeing their intellectual aspirations as fundamentally misguided or unfeminine.
But then paradoxically, he also specifies what does inspire his respect and even fear for woman.
Yes, it's complex. He respects her more natural nature, which he associates with the cunning suppleness of a beast of prey, the tiger's claw under the glove, her naivete of her egoism, her uneducability and inner wildness, the incomprehensibility, scope, and movement of her desires and virtues, the untamed aspect.
And what elicits his pity?
He pities her because she appears to suffer more, to be more vulnerable, more in need of love, and more condemned to disappointment than any other animal. His famous or infamous assertion on the matter is, Mulier tasciat de muliem.
Which means?
Woman be silent about woman, reflecting his belief that women should not, or perhaps cannot, truly speak authentically about their own nature.
Nietzsche's statements here are clearly intended to provoke, and they stand in stark contrast to many modern ideas of gender inequality and the progress we believe we've made.
Absolutely.
This raises an important question for us. What can we learn about the historical tension between evolving social values and deeply ingrained, often prejudiced, philosophical perspectives? It's a snapshot of a particular, very controversial viewpoint from that era.
It certainly is, and it challenges us to consider the underlying assumptions not just of his time, but perhaps of our own as well.
Okay. Having laid bare what he perceives as the flaws of modern society and its moralities, Nietzsche then pivots, as he often does, towards his ideal.
Yes, towards his vision of the philosopher of the future and the noble soul, offering a path forward out of what he saw as a moral wasteland.
All right, section 4, the path forward. The philosopher of the future, and the noble soul.
After all this critique, after tearing down so many traditional assumptions, Nietzsche begins to sketch out his ideal, a new kind of human being, especially a new kind of philosopher.
These aren't just thinkers in armchairs, are they?
No, not at all. They are pioneers, audacious attempters, venturing into dangerous, uncharted territory.
He even gives them that new evocative name, calling these new species of philosophers attempters, Versucher, which you mentioned in German also carries the connotation of a tempter.
Exactly. It suggests someone who tests boundaries, who probes, maybe even seduces others towards dangerous ideas. They are individuals who inherently want to remain riddles themselves.
Not seeking clarity for everyone.
Definitely not dogmatists. In fact, it would offend their pride and taste if their truth were a truth for every man. Their motto is distinct and defiant. My judgment is my judgment. No one else is easily entitled to it.
That sounds like a declaration of radical intellectual independence, a personal manifesto.
It really is. These philosophers are distinguished by critical discipline and every habit that is conducive to cleanliness and severity in matters of the spirit.
Cleanliness and severity. Interesting pairing.
Yes, they possess certainty of value standards, meaning they have their own internal compass for what truly matters. They employ unity of method in their thinking. They have a shrewd courage to venture where others fear. And crucially, the ability to stand alone and give an account of themselves without relying on external validation.
Standing alone seems key here.
Very key. They take a pleasure in saying no and in taking things apart, actively enjoying the demolition of old ideas, and possess a certain level-headed cruelty that knows how to handle a knife surely and subtly, even when the heart bleeds.
Level-headed cruelty, that's such a jarring phrase, isn't it? It implies this detached, almost surgical approach to dismantling ideas, even cherished ones, even if it causes internal pain.
It's a striking image. It's not about malice, but about intellectual honesty and rigor pushed to the extreme. They'll not dally with truth, in a sentimental way, simply to be pleased or elevated by her.
No comfort-seeking here.
Quite the opposite. They will feel nausea over everything that is enthusiastic, idealistic, feminine, hermaphroditic in this vein, rejecting any approach to truth that is sentimental or unrigorous. They see critics not as equals, but as mere instruments of the philosopher.
And what is the philosopher's true task then? Not just analyzing.
No. Their true monumental task is not simply to analyze existing values or truths, but to actively create values, to set new standards, new moral compasses for humanity, rather than merely observing or refining existing ones.
So they're legislators of value, not just commentators.
Exactly. Active shapers of morality and culture. He explicitly contrasts them with someone like Kant, the great Chinese of Königsberg, whom he calls merely a great critic, not a creator of values in this sense.
Imagine a philosopher who takes joy in demolition, wields a knife with level-headed cruelty, and despises enthusiasm in the pursuit of truth. What would such a rigorous, even inhumane approach offer us? It's a stark contrast to the gentle sage ideal.
A very stark contrast. And this brings us directly to the core of Nietzsche's ethical vision, the noble soul and its inherent order of rank.
Right. This is where Nietzsche's vision truly diverges from much of what we consider modern morality and democratic ideals. He speaks of noble souls and an order of rank among human beings, rather than universal equality. This sounds fundamentally anti-egalitarian.
It is, fundamentally and unapologetically. Nietzsche argues that Every enhancement of the type man has so far been the work of an aristocratic society.
Aristocratic, meaning ruled by the best.
Yes, but also implying a hierarchical structure. A society which, in his view, needs slavery in some sense or other. Not necessarily literal chattel slavery, though historically that was often present, but a system where some serve as the foundation upon which others can build and ascend.
That's a deeply uncomfortable idea today.
Extremely. This society, he explains, believes in a long ladder of an order of rank and differences in value between man and man. He posits that the pathos of distance, and this is a central concept for him.
Pathos of distance.
Yeah.
What exactly is that?
It's a profound, almost reverential feeling of separation and hierarchical distinction. It arises from a strict social structure, the psychological and emotional gap between a ruling noble caste and the lower strata. The feeling the ruling caste has looking down, feeling its own distinctness and superiority.
And he thinks this feeling is good,
Mhm.
necessary.
Yes. For Nietzsche, this sense of distance, of inherent difference in value, isn't something to be eliminated or apologized for. It's actually necessary for the enhancement of the type man, for the creation of truly great individuals, for culture to reach its highest peaks.
So a certain inherent inequality, a hierarchy, is not just natural, but in his view, essential for human progress and improvement. It's a hard idea for many of us to swallow.
Very hard. He describes a morality of the ruling group that is most alien and embarrassing to the present taste, precisely because it insists one has duties only to one's peers.
Only to your equals.
Yes. Against those of a lower rank, one may behave as one pleases or as the heart desires, and in any case, beyond good and evil, here pity and like feelings may find their place. Pity is reserved for the lower orders, not a guiding principle among equals.
Wow. So beyond good and evil applies between ranks.
In that specific context, yes. This noble morality also includes things like long gratitude and long revenge, a sophisticated concept of friendship born of shared challenges among equals, and even a necessity for having enemies.
Why a necessity for enemies?
As drainage ditches for the effects, he says, allowing strong emotions like envy, quarrelsomeness, high spirits to be channeled outwards productively rather than festering internally. He explicitly states that the longing for freedom, so central to modern thought, belongs to slave morality.
And what belongs to aristocratic thinking?
Reverence and devotion are symptoms of aristocratic thinking, showing respect for established greatness and a sense of belonging to something higher than oneself.
And what about egoism? We usually condemn that as a vice. How does it fit into the noble soul?
For Nietzsche, it's essential. Egoism belongs to the nature of a noble soul. I mean, that unshakable faith that to a being such as we are, other beings must be subordinate by nature and have to sacrifice themselves.
They just accept this as natural.
Yes, the noble soul accepts this as justice itself, without question or guilt, seeing its own existence and flourishing as inherently justified. It moves among its equals with sureness of modesty and delicate reverence, honoring itself in them.
So there's respect among equals, but a fundamental difference below.
Exactly. And critically, the noble soul does not like to look up, but either ahead, horizontally and slowly, or down. It knows itself to be at a height. This is about profound self-reverence and inner certainty of one's own value and rank.
He makes that sharp distinction, noting the noble soul has reverence for itself, contrasting this with common souls who need external rules, or even educated people who lack modesty because they're still seeking external validation.
It's an internal standard, an earned self-respect that doesn't need external approval.
Nietzsche's concept of the noble soul and order of rank directly challenges the egalitarian principles many of us hold dear, and it's clearly meant to.
Absolutely. It forces us to consider if certain forms of excellence or enhancement of humanity might require conditions that are deeply uncomfortable, even unjust, from our conventional moral standpoint. It makes us ask what we are truly willing to sacrifice or allow for the possibility of human greatness.
This pursuit of nobility, of becoming a philosopher of the future, requires immense personal strength, doesn't it? An uncompromising willingness to be alone and a radical commitment to self-overcoming. It sounds like a solitary and incredibly arduous path.
Indeed, it is portrayed as a profound and demanding personal journey. Nietzsche asserts that one has to test oneself to see that one is destined for independence and command, and do it at the right time.
Test oneself. How?
It means embracing a radical detachment, a willingness to cut ties when necessary, not to remain stuck to a person, not even the most loved.
Wow, not even the most loved.
Not to remain stuck to a fatherland, not to remain stuck to some pity, not to remain stuck to a science, not to remain stuck to one's own detachment, not to remain stuck to our own virtues.
Not even stuck to your own virtues. That sounds like a constant process of shedding attachments, even positive ones, for the sake of something greater. Almost a ruthless self-purification.
Precisely. You can't become complacent even in your own achievements or moral stances. The hardest test of independence, he argues, is one must know how to conserve oneself, to maintain that core integrity through all the shedding.
And how does this striving individual view others?
A human being striving for greatness sees others, and even their own past self, often as means or as a delay and obstacle or as a temporary resting place. It's a lonely path. This type of person knows solitude and what is most poisonous in it, recognizing that profound isolation is often a necessary price for their unique development.
So genius isn't just about raw talent then. It's more about the will and the ability to act decisively.
That's a crucial point. Genius is perhaps not so rare as we think, but what's truly needed are the 500 hands it requires to tyrannize the kairos, the right time, seizing chance by its forelock.
Kairos, the opportune moment.
Exactly. Not just clock time, but the critical juncture. It takes immense will and capacity to act when that moment arrives. He also notes, somewhat melancholically, that the greatest events and thoughts, but the greatest thoughts of the greatest events, are comprehended last by those contemporary with them. True originality is often initially unrecognized.
So what does prove the greatness of such a person, if not actions or works immediately understood?
Ultimately, it is not actions that prove him, nor is it works. It is the faith that is decisive here. Some fundamental certainty that a noble soul has about itself. This self-assured faith, this inner certainty, is paramount.
He illustrates this with that very personal, almost sad observation about building a house.
Yes. If one has finished building one's house, one suddenly realizes that in the process, one has learned something that one really needed to know in the worst way before one began. The eternal, distasteful too late.
It's such a powerful reflection on the hard-won wisdom that only comes after the struggle, when it might feel too late for the original project. How many of us cling to comforts, relationships, or even our own perceived virtues, when true independence might demand a radical break? What would it take for you, listening, to conserve yourself in the face of such relentless demands for self-overcoming? It's a profound question about commitment and ambition.
And finally, woven through all of Nietzsche's work, like a golden thread, is another element that, for him, defines the truly high human being.
Oh,
A particular kind of laughter.
laughter.
Yes, laughter tied to the very nature of art and what he calls the genius of the heart. Nietzsche speaks of an Olympian vice laughter and how it reveals the order of rank among philosophers.
Olympian vice. That's
Right.
intriguing. So it's not just a physical act, but a profound attitude towards life.
Exactly. Towards life, suffering oneself. He's challenging thinkers like Thomas Hobbes, who famously called laughter a bad infirmity, a sign of malice or feeling superior.
And Nietzsche is saying the opposite, that the capacity for a certain kind of laughter is actually a mark of philosophical superiority.
Precisely. He suggests an order of rank among philosophers, depending on the rank of their laughter, all the way up to those capable of golden laughter.
Golden laughter. What does that signify?
It isn't cruel or contemptuous, but rather a sign of profound wisdom and detachment, a joyous affirmation even in the face of life's absurdity and pain. He notes playfully that gods enjoy mockery. It seems they cannot suppress laughter even during holy rites.
So there's a lateness, even a mischievousness to the highest state.
Yes, this joyous, sometimes mocking laughter, this profound levity in the face of seriousness, is connected to what he calls the genius of the heart, which he identifies with the god Dionysus.
Ah, Dionysus. Tell us more about this genius of the heart and how it manifests as Dionysus. He's such a powerful, almost mystical figure in Nietzsche's philosophy.
He really is. Dionysus is described as that great concealed one, the tempter god and born Pied Piper of consciences, whose voice knows how to descend into the netherworld of every soul.
A Pied Piper of consciences. Leading them where?
Into deeper self-knowledge, perhaps. This genius teaches one to listen, to truly hear the deep currents within oneself. It smooths rough souls, helps them taste a new desire, to lie still as a mirror, that the deep sky may mirror itself in them.
Like finding a deep calm and refinitivity.
Yes, but also more. He's a divining rod for every grain of gold buried in the soul, drawing out hidden potential. Crucially, Dionysus, especially in Nietzsche's later works, stands for controlled and creatively employed passion.
Controlled and creative passion, not just wild abandon.
Exactly. It's a celebration of our drives, but channeled and refined, contrasting sharply with the ascetic extirpation of passions advocated by some philosophies and religions. From Dionysus's touch, everyone walks away, richer in himself, newer to himself than before, broken open.
Broken open.
Perhaps more unsure, tenderer, more fragile, more broken, but full of hopes that as yet have no name, full of new will and currents, full of new dissatisfaction and undertows.
That sounds like a process of profound transformation. Painful, maybe, but ultimately enriching. It leaves you more expanded, but maybe also more vulnerable, more open-ended. A dynamic view of the self.
Very dynamic. And this concept also connects directly back to the idea of masks and deception, which Nietzsche sees as essential for profound thinkers and noble souls.
Because they've been broken open and are too complex to be easily understood.
Perhaps. He emphasizes that every profound thinker is more afraid of being understood than of being misunderstood, choosing to wear masks rather than reveal their full, complex, perhaps unsettling truth too readily. Man, he says, is a manifold, mendacious, artificial, and opaque animal, has invented the good conscience to enjoy his soul for once as simple.
We simplify ourselves to feel comfortable.
Yes. He goes so far as to say, the whole of morality is a long, undismayed forgery, which alone makes it at all possible to enjoy the sight of the soul. This suggests that more refined humanity respects the mask, understanding its necessity not as a vice, but as an artistry, a protective and creative layer essential for growth and self-preservation in a complex world.
This idea of masks and self-deception as positive, even artistic, is quite startling. It's another fundamental inversion of conventional morality, isn't it? It's about self-creation, not just self-disclosure.
It absolutely is. And Nietzsche uses his own poem, the Aftersong from High Mountains, which concludes Beyond Good and Evil, as a profound reflection of this personal transformation, this embrace of solitude and a new self.
Can you share a bit of that?
He writes, asking himself, am I another self-estranged? From me did I elude? A wrestler who too oft himself subdued, straining against his strength too frequently, wounded and stopped by his own victory.
Wounded and stalked by his own victory. That perfectly captures the essence of self-overcoming, doesn't it? The constant, often solitary struggle, even being harmed by your own progress.
It does. And he also poses that incredible question, Warst einst du jung, jetzt bist du besser younger, which Kaufman translates as, once you were young, now you are even younger.
Better younger. Not just staying young, but becoming younger in a better way.
Yes. It's a powerful statement about continuous becoming, self-reinvention, not just maintaining youth, but transcending it through transformation.
So what if laughter, this Olympian vice, or even a certain kind of deception or mask, is not a witness, but a sign of profound strength, a necessary tool for growth and self-discovery? And how might embracing the spirit of Dionysus-controlled creative passion transform our understanding of our own desires and potential, making us not just young, but better younger, continually evolving?
It's a call to a more artistic, dynamic, and perhaps unsettling engagement with life itself, isn't it?
Definitely. Okay, let's try to wrap this up. We've journeyed through Nietzsche's radical reevaluation of Western thought. It's been quite a ride.
It certainly has.
Challenging the very idea of absolute truth, revealing the hidden desires of the heart behind philosophy, and meticulously deconstructing our notions of the I and free will.
We've immersed ourselves in his provocative critiques of democratic herd morality and Christianity.
Which are definitely provocative.
And then explored his vision of the philosopher of the future, the attempter, and the noble soul, defined by radical independence, constant self-overcoming.
And that unique capacity for Olympian laughter, even in the face of life's deepest challenges.
So as we conclude this deep dive, maybe consider Nietzsche's profound question from his Aftersong. Once you were young, now you are even younger. It speaks of a continuous becoming, a necessary self-estrangement, a willingness to be wounded by your own victories in the pursuit of something higher. What does this mean for you?
Yeah, that's the question to sit with.
As you reflect on your own truths and values, your own sense of self and purpose, are you willing to embrace the kind of self-overcoming that might make you newer to yourself than before?
Perhaps more unsure, tender, more fragile, more broken.
But also, as he says, full of hopes that as yet have no name, full of new will and currents, full of new dissatisfaction and undertows. Is your aim merely to be young or to strive for the discomfort and dynamism of becoming better younger?
That's the challenge Nietzsche leaves us with. A lot to think about. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep into the ideas that shape your world.